Janaballabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Padavajikacharya Stotaras of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajikacharya Stotaras of the Śrīmad Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Ananta Gaudiya Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Vaitagradhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Ganga Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 3rd canto, Chapter 32, Entanglement and Fruit of Activities, and we're up to text 2. Sa cāpi bhagavad-dharmāt kāma-mūḍha parāṅ-mukhaḥ yajate kratubhir devān pittrzs śraddhayānvitaḥ Cāpi bhagavat-dharmāt Cāpi bhagavat-dharmāt kāma-mūḍha parāṅ-mukhaḥ kāma-mūḍha parāṅ-mukhaḥ yajate kratubhir devān yajate kratubhir devān pittrzs śraddhayānvitaḥ pittrzs śraddhayānvitaḥ Cāpi bhagavat-dharmāt kāma-mūḍha parāṅ-mukhaḥ yajate kratubhir devān pittrzs śraddhayānvitaḥ Vaishnavis. Sa he cāpi, moreover, bhagavat-dharmāt, from devotional service, kāma-mūḍha, infatuated by lust, parāk-mukhaḥ, having the face turned away, yajate, worships, kratubhir, with sacrificial ceremonies, devān, the demigods, pittawan, the forefathers, and śraddhayā, with faith, anvitaḥ, endowed. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Such persons are ever bereft of devotional service due to being too attached to sense gratification. And therefore, although they perform various kinds of sacrifices and take great vows to satisfy the demigods and forefathers, they are not interested in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, devotional service. Purport. In Bhagavad-gītā, chapter 7, text 20, it is said that persons who worship demigods have lost their intelligence. Kāma-mūḍhas ritajnana. They are much attracted to sense gratification, and therefore they worship the demigods. It is, of course, recommended in the Vedic scriptures that if one wants money, health, or education, he should worship various demigods. A materialistic person has manifold demands, and thus there are manifold demigods to satisfy his senses. The grihamedis who want to continue a prosperous materialistic way of life generally worship the demigods or forefathers by offering pinda, or respectful oblations. Such persons are bereft of Kṛṣṇa consciousness and are not interested in devotional service to the Lord. This kind of so-called pious and religious man is the result of impersonalism. The impersonalists maintain that the Supreme Absolute Truth has no form, and that one can imagine any form he likes for his benefit and worship in that way. Therefore, the grihamedis, or materialistic men, say that they can worship any form of a demigod. Therefore, the grihamedis, or materialistic men, said they can worship any form of a demigod as worship of the Supreme Lord. Especially amongst the Hindus, those who are meat eaters prefer to worship goddess Kali, because it is prescribed that one can sacrifice a goat before that goddess. They maintain that whether one worships the goddess Kali or the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, or any demigod, the destination is the same. This is first-class rascaldom. And such people are misled. But they prefer this philosophy. Bhagavad-gītā does not accept such rascaldom. And it is clearly stated that such methods are meant for persons who have lost their intelligence. The same judgment is confirmed here. And the word kāma-mūḍha, meaning one who has lost his sense or is infatuated by the lust of attraction for sense gratification, is used. Kāma-mūḍhas are bereft of Kṛṣṇa consciousness and devotional service, and are infatuated by a strong desire for sense gratification. The worshippers of demigods are condemned both in Bhagavad-gītā and in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Om Gyanātimirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshuramilatam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamrupa Karamayam Dharapti Swaparantikam. So let's work through this translation and purport and see what we understand. Okay, so Prabhupada starts off by saying in the translation, or Lord Kapila Dev starts off by saying in the translation, such persons are bereft of devotional service due to being too attached to sense gratification. So who are the persons that are being referred to here? Who are the such? Such persons are ever bereft of devotional service due to being too attached to sense. Who are they? Who's being referred to here? Yes, thank you. Just previous verse, the Grihamatis. Okay. Now, so the Grihamatis, what are they doing? They're performing various kinds of sacrifices and they take great vows to satisfy the demigods. So this is also described in the second chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā. Kṛṣṇa says, Yam imam pushpatam vacham pravashanti avipaschata veda vadarata parta nanyarastiti vadina karmatmana swarga para janma karma palapradam kriya vishesha bahulam bhogaishvarya gatim prati. That these men of small knowledge, avipaschata, small, they're very attracted to the flowery language of the Vedas, which recommends performing different sacrifices to the demigods, the forefathers like that. And the result is that you go to heavenly planets and you enjoy, like anything. Prabhupada describes in the purport there in the second chapter that there's, in the heavenly planets, there's these gardens called Kadamba Kananas. No, I can't remember, something like that. And there's profuse, beautiful, angelic women and profuse supply of somaras, and you can, so like that. That's what they're after. And but then in the next verse in the Bhagavad-gītā 2:44, Kṛṣṇa says, explains what the result of that is. He says, and it's basically the same statement that Kapila is making here. He says, Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam tayaparita chetasam vayavasayatmaka buddhi samadhau nabadhiyate. That in the minds of those who are attracted by sense gratification and material opulence and are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service does not take place. Samadhau nabadhiyate. See, so that's the result. That's the people who are being described here. Grihamatis. Actually, Grihamatis aren't the lowest. Grihamatis are actually, from the perspective of modern day man, in one sense, you can almost consider them kind of like elevated in the sense that they're following something Vedic. Once actually Prabhupada was asked, I can't remember, it was Mother Jadharani/Shamarani, but he was asked, who's better, the worshippers of Jesus Christ or the worshippers of the Kali? And Prabhupada said the worshippers of Kali, because they're accepting Vedic authority. See, so the Grihamatis that are being described here, who are being criticized here, almost condemned, they're better than they're karmis. Does everybody know the difference between a karmi and a vikarmi? There's a difference. Karmi is like what we're hearing about here. Karmis, they accept Vedic authority, but they're accepting Vedic authority for what purpose? For improving their material situation. That's what we're hearing about. That's what's the Grihamatis that are being referred to here. These are people they're accepting Vedic authority. There's certain portions of the Vedic literature that are recommend these. Okay, you can do these different things and you can improve your material situation. So that's a karmi, okay? And a vikarmi is somebody who's also interested in improving their material situation, but they're not interested in following. They don't accept Vedic authority. So they just go about it in their own way. Yeah? They're described in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā, called divine and demoniac nature, in the verses that talk about the demoniac. They don't accept Vedic authority at all. They're just, okay. Now, somebody might ask, well, it says here in the last chapter, the worshippers of the demigods are condemned, both in the Bhagavad-gītā and in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. But in the purport we heard here, it says, this is kind of bewildering, it says in the purport, it is of course recommended in the Vedic scriptures that if one wants money, health, or education, then he should worship the various demigods. Hey, what's going on here? Why is the Vedic scriptures recommending that one worships, if one wants money, health, and education, that they should worship various demigods, because we just heard right at the end of the purport it says that the worship of the demigods is condemned in the Bhagavad-gītā and the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. How do we understand this? Let's read the sentence again. I'll read it and listen very carefully. It is of course recommended in the Vedic scriptures that if one wants money, health, or education, then he should worship various demigods. It's saying you should worship various demigods. I'll read it again and listen to I'll give you a clue by my emphasis and how I pronounce it. Okay? It is of course recommended in the Vedic scriptures that if one wants money, health, or education, then he should worship various demigods. So that was a clue. Well, in other words, it's not saying that you should. It is saying that you should worship the demigods if that's what you want, but it's not saying that you should want that. Got it? It says if one wants money, health, education, he should then worship the various demigods. But it's not saying you should want that. You shouldn't want that, right? We shouldn't be, worshiping for those things, right? Now, ironically enough, Prabhupada quotes in this purport here, this is chapter 7, text 20, about the persons who worship the demigods have lost their intelligence. That verse is, Kamais tais tai ritagyana papajan te niyadevataha tam tam niyamam ashtaya prakutya niyatashvaya. That, their intelligence is stolen by lust, and they just follow the rules and regulations for material enjoyment like that. But in the purport to that, Prabhupada says, he makes an interesting comment, he says, or an interesting reference, if in the event that one does, because it says, if one wants money, health, and education, he should worship the demigods. But in the purport to 720 in the Bhagavad-gītā, Prabhupada says, if one at all does want those things, it's not that you should want them, you shouldn't. But in the event that you do want those things, money, health, it says, Prabhupada says you should follow the instruction of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 2nd canto, 1st chapter, text 10. I can't remember which chapter it is, but it goes, Akama sarva kāma-va, moksha kāma udaradi, tivrena bhakti yogena, yajate purusham param. That whether you want, that verse says, whether you want fulfillment of all material desires, you want liberation, or you want nothing, to do with either of those, you should worship very forcefully, like the rays of the sun, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for the fulfillment of all desires. So that's recommended, that whatever you want, even if it's these things, you should worship Kṛṣṇa and let Kṛṣṇa kind of take care of it. Be satisfied with whatever Kṛṣṇa gives you, arranges for you. So that's stated there. So, I'm trying to make this relevant to our situation now. So we understand about that, there's vikarmis, they want material enjoyment, they don't recognize Vedic authority. They're just, by hook or by crook, they're just interested in, getting it somehow. And as I said, they're described in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā, divine and demoniac nature. Okay? Then there's karmis. Karmis, they do accept the authority of Vedic literature, but the portions of it that recommend the various sacrifices that one can perform to the demigods and the forefathers and like that for elevation to heavenly planets where you can enjoy like that. That's them. Then above them above the karmis, there's karma yogis, and that might be us to a certain extent, because a karma yogi is somebody they're trying to connect with Kṛṣṇa, but they're attached. We all have a certain psychophysiological makeup, which means we all like to function in a certain way. We're attracted to try to, interact with this world in a particular way according to the body we have, the karma we have. So when you do that and you offer it in service to Kṛṣṇa, that's karma yoga. And pure bhakti yoga is when you have no attachment. You're prepared to do anything and everything, whether it's your nature or it's not your nature. You'll just do whatever the spiritual master wants you to do. So that's my understanding of that. Okay, so our situation is that, we all are in these material bodies, and we all have some desire, material desire, and we can understand from this verse and the verses I quoted from the Bhagavad-gītā that it's not going to help us, right? Bhogashvari prasaktanam. If you, in the minds of those who are too much attached to material opulence and sense enjoyment, the resolute determination for devotional service or samadhi doesn't take place. So, what do we do about that? Well, in the Bhagavatam, in the 7th canto, can't remember the exact verse, but there's a verse where it talks about how a man, for our purposes, it could be a man or a woman, okay? But a man, let's use the Bhagavatam verse. The man is like a butter pot, or a clay pot with ghee in it, and women are like the fire, okay? And when you get the butter pot, when it gets close to the fire, when it's exposed to heat, it melts, okay? So, in one sense, we're all butter pots. You can think of yourself as a butter pot, okay? In this sense, that Prabhupada explains elsewhere that there's only one Purusha, Kṛṣṇa. Kṛṣṇa is the enjoyer. And all of us, all the living entities, we're prakriti. We're meant to be enjoyed. In other words, we're meant to supply enjoyment to Kṛṣṇa, see? So in that sense, we're all, man or woman. Actually, those verses, there were some verses, if you remember in the previous chapter, where it said and for the woman, the husband is the Maya. For the man, the woman is Maya, but for the woman, the husband, the man is Maya, because she's also meant, human body is meant for self-realization. Doesn't matter if you're in a man's body or a woman's body. When you're in a human body, you're meant to try for self-realization. See, so in that case, from that perspective, the woman, when seen materially, is not good, not helpful for the man, and the man when seen materialistically is not beneficial for the woman. See, so we're all prakriti, and we're all trying to be purushas. That's the problem, here in the material world. So we're all like the butter pot, and so what's good for the butter pot? We know what's bad for the butter pot, to get near the fire, to get near the heat. Okay, right? You put the butter pot near the heat, it's going to melt. But what's good for the butter pot? Well, what's good for the butter pot is if you keep it in the refrigerator, right? Keep that butter pot in the refrigerator, and then it's safe, no problem, right? So what's the refrigerator in this case? The refrigerator is the instructions of the spiritual master. That's the refrigerator, right? If you're always taking shelter of the instructions of the spiritual master, your butter pot is safe. It's not going to melt. In other words, your consciousness is not going to become absorbed in material sense gratification. So what are some examples of the refrigerator? In general, the refrigerator is the walk-in fridge, like you have in the DD room or in the big kitchen there. So there's different shelves, okay, in the refrigerator. And what are the different shelves? Well, the morning program. That's a very important shelf in the refrigerator. If you want to protect your butter pot, come to the morning program. Yeah. Go to bed early, get up early, take a nice cold shower if you can, or at least a shower, put on some clean clothes, and come to Mangalarti. That's very important. Prabhupada emphasized it. Coming to the whole morning program. Prabhupada referred to it as the morning. To be honest with you, we used to have an evening program back in the old days, and Prabhupada referred to it as the Krishna conscious sandwich. If you have a morning program and an evening program, it's like the two pieces of bread on the sandwich, And if you got two pieces of bread, what's in the sandwich doesn't fall out, right? But if you just have one and you start moving around, you might lose it all. But anyway, we at least want to start off with that one piece of bread, the morning program. That's an important shelf in the refrigerator. Another shelf in the refrigerator is Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada made different statements. I can't remember verbatim right at the moment, but to the effect that he's his books. If you want to associate with Prabhupada, read his books. This is Prabhupada's, he said once, I think, devotional ecstasies. Prabhupada said the best of me is in my books. He placed more importance, and actually he would make that point in a philosophical way. There's Vani and there's Vapu. So the Vapu is like the physical association. There's a lot of devotees, a lot of people who got to be around Prabhupada, physical proximity, and even, become his disciples. But the Vani is more important, the instruction, the instruction. Prabhupada, as different devotees said, he sacrificed his sleep, to get up and write these purports, and he would meditate. And Prabhupada actually said, when I sit down to write these books, I don't write these books, Prabhupada would say. So when I sit down to write these books, Kṛṣṇa comes and he tells me what to write. He dictates. So when you read these books, you're getting the association of Prabhupada, and you're getting association of Kṛṣṇa. Because Kṛṣṇa, it's actually in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a purport where it says that the speech of a pure devotee is managed by Kṛṣṇa from within his heart. See, so you're getting the association of both Prabhupada and Kṛṣṇa when you read the books. We're hearing verses just over the last few weeks about how don't be in a secluded place with a woman, or if you're a woman, don't be in a secluded place with a man. So what can you be in a secluded place? Be in a secluded place with Prabhupada's books. If you want to be in a secluded place with something, be in a secluded place with Prabhupada's books. That's a good thing to be. And just hang out with Prabhupada's purports. The purports are the really important thing. Prabhupada, put so much. There's humor in these purports. There's everything. There's, when you really, and this is something I found, and I think you'll find it if you try it. That when you read a purport, you can read it, and the first time, okay, yeah, I got that. That's what he's saying. But then you read it again, and you get more out of it. And you read it again, and you get more out of it, and it doesn't end. That's what I've experienced. The more deeply you go into it, you can read and reread and you keep getting deeper and deeper. More things become revealed to you. You start understanding more things, and you realize, oh, wow, this is really deep. This is really deep. It's just, you get into it more and more and more. These are not ordinary essays, They're really special. They're powerful. They're potent. These are potent literatures. So that's an important thing. And I'll kind of give another example that will sort of elaborates on this example, but coming from a different angle. Okay, so another shelf in the refrigerator is Prabhupada's lectures. Prabhupada's lectures. Now, I personally got to attend between 18 and 24 lectures that Prabhupada gave. He gave some in New York. I was at Mayapur Festival, 1976. He spoke every morning, at that time, and Philadelphia, New Vrindavan. I added it all up. It was like, between a dozen and a couple dozen, okay? I was personally there, sitting in the audience like you're sitting here now listening to me, okay? I don't remember a word. I don't remember a word that he said, to be honest with you. I do. I remember a couple of words, because once I asked a question at the end of a Bhagavad-gītā class. I'll just quickly tell that one. So I asked Prabhupada, Prabhupada gave a Bhagavad-gītā class towards the end of 1973. And he said, at the end of the class, he asked, are there any questions? And it was one or two questions. And then Prabhupada asked the third time, are there any questions? And nobody raised their hand. I was a bhakta still at that time. I'd been in the temple about 6 months or something. So nobody raised their hand. And Prabhupada asked the second time, and he said, are there any questions? And nobody raised their hand. And I was looking around. I remember I was thinking, I actually clearly remember, I said, come on, somebody ask a question. It's obvious that Prabhupada wants to keep talking, but nobody was raising their hand. And Prabhupada asked the third time, are there any questions? And nobody was raising their hand, and I raised my hand. And they called on me, and I didn't have a question, but I just raised my hand because I was feeling, in my, neophyte conscience, I was feeling uncomfortable for Srila Prabhupada, because I was imagining that he's, this is embarrassing for Prabhupada. He obviously wants to keep speaking. Somebody should ask a question, so I raised my hand. And they called on me. And I said, well, Prabhupada, could you say something about the mercy of Lord Chaitanya? And Prabhupada, but I didn't probably speak up loudly and clearly like I did just now. So Prabhupada looked over at his servant, Shruti Kirti, and he went like, I don't know if he said anything. I remember the face. He looked like that. Like, what did he say? And Shruti Kirti walked up to him, got really close to him, and leaned over and said something into his ear. Up until that point, Prabhupada was sitting on the Vyasasana like this, very relaxed, leaning back on the bolsters, And then Sridhar repeated something to him. I don't know what he said. He doesn't remember either. I asked him, by the way, and he couldn't remember the whole thing. But right after whatever Sridhar said to him, Prabhupada sat up very straight, and he said, "It is already said," like this. He said, "It is already said, Padam Vijayate Shri Kṛṣṇa Sankirtanam." So, continue doing Sankirtan, and you'll be victorious. And that was it. He didn't ask for any more questions. And I was kind of like, "Whoa, what happened? Did I just get chastised, or what happened?" I don't know. I really, it was like, I didn't know what hit me, right? And then, it was the end of the class, and a devotee walked up to me, and he said, "Oh, congratulations, Bhakta Jeff." I said, what do you mean? He said, "Well, you just got a personal instruction from Srila Prabhupada." I said, "Oh, okay, thank you." That was good. So anyway, but that's the only thing I remember from all the classes I was at. But the point I want to make is, though, that since, what I do is I listen to the lectures, and I get a lot out of it. I mean, I couldn't remember anything from the classes I was personally at, but I get a lot out of listening to Prabhupada's lectures on, the internet and like that, just whatever you can have. We used to have cassette tapes, and I had them all. I had all the different, like 50 or whatever it was, boxes of these cassette tapes, and then they went to CDs, and now it's just, you can just go on a website and listen. But the point is that you can get a lot out of listening to Prabhupada's lectures. And actually, I find that I get more out of it, well, not definitely, my experience is I'm getting way more out of listening to the recordings than when I was right there. When I can't remember anything from the lectures I was at. But when you hear it on the recording, I listen, and it's like you're not like thinking about who's sitting next to you or what's going on or what you got to do in 15 minutes or there's so many different other things that, no, it's just like you and the lecture, and you get yourself in a nice situation where you can, just relax and really listen to what Prabhupada's saying, like we do on Sunday morning, you're hearing it, you're seeing it on the thing, they pass out the papers, you can really kind of try to concentrate and get absorbed in it, and I get a lot out of that. And what I do is when I listen to a lecture, if I hear something, I've mentioned this before, but I think it's helpful, so I'll mention it again. When I hear something, I just try to remember a few words, and then I go back onto that same website that I'm listening on, and I just put in those few words, and I find the transcription of the lecture, see? And I find that particular passage that, that I heard, that what Prabhupada said, that really kind of, I thought, well, wow, this is important. And I copy and paste it, from the transcription, and I send it to myself as an email. See, so now I got it. And then I use that when I talk to devotees or when I give a class like that. And Prabhupada said if you do like that, that solidifies. When you actually repeat, when you hear something and you kind of meditate on it and then you repeat it, you share it with other devotees or preach it or whatever, then that solidifies the knowledge. It goes deeper like that. So that's a good thing to do. So that's another shelf in the refrigerator. That's an important shelf because, samadhi is nothing other than just remembering, you see? So this is how you remember more and more. You just hear something, and then it shouldn't go in one ear and out the other. It should go in one ear and just stay there. Keep it, plug off the other one. Keep it in there, keep it in there. Hear it, think about it, talk about it, preach it like that, and then it becomes part of your personality. You get realization like that. Okay, so that's a shelf. And another point is, well, as I said, all these activities that we're doing, these are all different samadhis. There's dressing the deity samadhi, there's cooking the offering samadhi, there's giving the class samadhi, there's leading the kirtan samadhi, and, just in general, chanting. But we should be eager to do all these things. This is like, actually, if you have Brahman initiation, you're really missing out if you don't get in there and learn how to cook a Raj Bhog. Because I'm telling you, I've done that. I'm going to speak from logistics. That's a meditation. To cook a Raj Bhog offering, you really got to plan. First of all, you got to know what you're doing. You got to learn how to cook. But then even when you know, it's like there's 3 different subjis. There's a chutney and a sweet, and you got to make. It's really quite an elaborate type of thing. And it's a meditation. If you're not thinking about Kṛṣṇa, you're not thinking about what you're doing, you can't do a nice offering. So try it. You're meditating when you cook a Raj Bhog. Same thing, dressing the deities. I got fired twice. I was a pujari twice. I only lasted 1 day each time. I couldn't do that, you know. Once off of Radha Damodar, and once when I was in the Sydney temple. I don't know, I just didn't have what it took. But I know, I can appreciate that the people who do that, they're really meditating. I can see, you know, when they open the deities in the morning, you see all the pujaris huddle up there, you know, and they're all pointing and talking about, oh, look at that, look at that. So it's a meditation. These are samadhis, you know, these are samadhis. And so they're important. We have to take, the point is we have to take shelter of these things. Prabhupada gave us these different activities, the program and the dressing of the deities and the cooking the offerings and the leading the kirtans and the giving the class. This is all to help us get absorbed in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, devotional service. And if we do that, then we're not going to get carried away by, you know, our mind's not going to get carried away by material desires. And I mean, it's significant. And I'll tell you why, because, you know, just even recently within ISKCON, there's been like, at least I became aware of 4 different people, you know, 4 different situations where somebody had some problem. And, you know, it's discouraging when you hear that. But it's discouraging when you hear that. And you know, oh, here's the point I wanted to make. Prabhupada said this. He said, don't be surprised by who leaves. Be surprised by who stays. You've heard that? Svasis heard that. I never saw it in writing, but right, you know, that was like back years ago. You know, you hear that all the time. Prabhupada said, "Don't be surprised by who leaves. Be surprised by who stays." In other words, what does he mean by that? It's a challenge. This is a challenge. You know, it's not a cakewalk. You know, Kṛṣṇa consciousness is a challenge. If we want to make it, we got to be prepared to roll up our sleeves. If you got sleeves, that is, and do the work. You know, you got to roll up your sleeves and do the work. Prabhupada, just the other day, I was listening to a lecture Prabhupada gave in New Vrindavan, Bhagavatam lecture 69, and he gave that example about if somebody falls in a well and they're crying, you know, help, get me out of here, get me out of here, and somebody comes and throws them a rope, and they have to at least be prepared to take that rope and tie it around their waist, you know, nice and tight, and then hold on to it and get pulled out. They can't just, you know, they can't expect that the rope comes down and, okay, well, grab the rope. No, I can't grab the rope. There's no helping you, you know. You got to grab the rope. You know, you want to get out of the well, you got to grab the rope. You see, like say you go to a doctor and your symptom is, well, you know, I'm seeing everything yellow, and everything that's sweet I tastes bitter, and the doctor goes, well, you got jaundice. That's the symptoms. Oh, well, what do I do? Well, here's the cure. Take this quinine. And you go, I don't know about that. And he says, no, don't worry. I had the same disease. I took it. I got cured. I've had a lot of patients, same symptoms. I give them that. They get cured. You got to be prepared to take it. You got to take the medicine, right? If you're thinking, I don't know about that. Okay, you stay jaundiced, right? So it's like that. We have to be prepared to, you know, really do it. What's the time? I can't actually see the clock clearly. Okay, I'll stop there. I have more things I could have added, but I'll stop there. Does anybody have any question or comment? I like to leave an opportunity for some discussion at the end of the class, or questions and answers. It's important. Yeah. While he's getting the mic, you know, does this process work? Yeah, it works. Kṛṣṇa says in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā, Vitaraga Bhaya-krodha manmana mamupashrita bahuvo jnana-tapasa putamad-bhavamagita. Kṛṣṇa himself says, he addresses that, does it work? He says, being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, and being fully absorbed, taking shelter in me and being fully absorbed in me, many persons in the past have become purified by knowledge of me, and thus they have attained transcendental love for me. See, so according to Kṛṣṇa, this process works. And according to Arjuna, padam brahma, padam dhamma, pavitram paramam bhavam, you know, according to Arjuna it works, and then somebody might say, well, they're biased, you know, it's Kṛṣṇa, it's right. But then Arjuna quotes all these different acharya, you know, Asita, Deva, Vyas, they all say it works, right? And even more recently, we have the acharyas like Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they say it works. And just even a few days ago, we had Patri here, Patri Prabhu. He was a pretty good example of how the process works, right? Did everybody hear a class or two of his? Pretty amazing personality, right? I mean, like, wow. If that isn't an example of somebody who's, you know, succeeded in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, wow, I don't know what is. So anyway, yeah, it works. So, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned how those people who want various material things such as wealth or education, they should worship the demigods. So does that mean...
I didn't say that. The purport says that.
In the purport, yeah. So does that mean if somebody...
Doesn't that represent you? What's in that book?
So...
I'll get to that. I'm not putting him down, I'm just clarifying. The purport says, Prabhupada's saying, it is of course recommended in the Vedic scriptures that if one wants money, health, or education, he should worship various demigods. So that's not my claim, that's Prabhupada saying that in the purport. So I'm just clarifying that Prabhupada says that in the purport. I'm not recommending, I'm not encouraging people to do that. I'm not encouraging people to worship demigods for the fulfillment of their material desires. That's what I was trying to clarify, okay? Yeah, question?
Okay, so if it says that in the purport that one should worship, if one wants these things, wealth, health, education, one should worship the demigods. So does that mean that those people that go to ordinary schools and colleges, they should also worship the demigods?
Nobody should worship the demigods. Nobody should worship the demigods. According to, because in the last sentence of the purport, Prabhupada says, the worshippers of demigods are condemned, both in the Bhagavad-gītā and the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So Bhagavad-gītā is spoken by Kṛṣṇa, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is written or spoken by Srila Vyasadeva, well, he's the author. So nobody should worship the demigods. If at all one wants a fulfillment of material desires, as I quoted, there's that verse of kāma-sarva kāma-va moksha kāma, one should worship Kṛṣṇa. It's not recommended that one want to do anything to try to fulfill material desires, but in the event that one does want, is adamant, is determined, then better to worship Kṛṣṇa for the fulfillment, not the demigods. It's never recommended by Kṛṣṇa or Vyasadeva. Actually, Vyasadeva was chastised by his spiritual master, Narada Muni. Do you remember that in the first canto? He was feeling, after he did all the Vedic literatures and everything, he was feeling kind of down and depressed, and he was thinking, what's wrong with me anyway? And he kind of knew, he kind of had a, but he was on his own, he sort of knew. But then Narada Muni appeared on the scene, and Narada Muni said, okay, well, you've neglected to glorify Kṛṣṇa. People already have an inclination for sense gratification, and you're presenting all this Vedic literature that tells them how to fulfill, it's okay, they're going to make some gradual advancement, but he used the word jugupsitam, abominable. He actually criticized him. He said, now write something that's glorifying Kṛṣṇa. That's the real thing that'll solve the problem, not this karma-kanda stuff. See, so that was the point. So it's, yeah.
Okay, so in other words, if one wants to, let's say, go to college and get a degree, one shouldn't worship demigods, just worship Kṛṣṇa and just do your studies like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Somebody else added something? You're not worshiping any demigod, right? You finished college, by the way.
Prabhuji, I have watched some videos online on YouTube that like a Prabhuji, he brings a mic to a person and then he asks, do you have a question? And then they ask a question and then they open a random page of the Gita and the answer is in on that page. So like it works that whatever question you have, you open a random page, it gives you the answer, but how does it work?
Sarvasya chaham riddhi-sanavishto mrtak-smriti jnanam apohanam cha. I don't think it's any it is, everything's mystical, but Krishna's in the heart, and he is supplying knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. I mean, I'm not sort of advocating that, that some mystical process goes on, but when somebody's really sincere and, enthusiastic in their devotional service, then they somehow or another Krishna arranges for them to hear what they need to hear, and they pick up on it. They realize, oh yeah, this is what I need to hear. It's amazing how it works like that. So Krishna is reciprocating with his devotees, and he uses other people as his instrument. Super Soul will use the Guru as his instrument. He'll use the books as his instrument, like that. So you get the inspiration or the information that you needed. Does that make sense? Okay. Acharya?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for your wonderful class. So in the purport, Prabhupada mentioned not just worship the demigods, but he also mentioned to worship the forefathers. So I had a problem with that in the sense that my guessing is that the forefathers are our ancestors, right? Okay. Imagine that your father or grandfather or grand-grandfather die, he might be in another body, right? Reincarnating. So when in the scriptures, for those who are karmic yogis, the Vedas recommends to worship the forefathers, what does that mean? Because that person is in another body. So how that process works?
Yeah, I don't know. Off the top of my head, I can't give you a good answer. I have to think about it and I'll get back to you. Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you. All right, Grantharaj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Try my best.